and that is part of the bail application if you're the prosecutor.
Kendall Coffey standing by as well. Kendall, and again, we'll know the answer to this question in a few moments here once bail is set. When a judge considers bail in a case like this, I imagine that the judge also considers means. Bill Cosby, extraordinarily wealthy. What else is considered, Kendall? That's not Kendall Coffey. Kendall, you there? We'll come back to Kendall in just a minute.
I'll post to the community.
There we go. There you go, Kendall. Did you hear that question?
The judge can consider alternatives to just a whopping bond. For example, what about home detention, house arrest with GPS monitoring systems to make sure he can't go anywhere? The presumption is that you try to see if there is a reasonable way to assure that he'll show up for trial. And I agree, he's got plenty of money. If he loses this case at trial, it could be tantamount to a life sentence. But on the other hand, there are lots of ways to make sure that one of the most famous comedy figures in American television history doesn't take off from the airport.
I want to bring in right now my friend and colleague, Kate Snow. And Kate, we just witnessed something that I don't think a lot of folks ever thought they would see. 78-year-old Bill Cosby in a gray sweater, always wearing a sweater with a cane, flanked by two folks we don't know who those people are, walking into a courtroom to face a judge on charges of sexual assault.
Yeah, unbelievable. Just an unbelievable image there, Craig. I think one of the women that you saw, the woman on his side, I think was Monique Presley, who is a lawyer for Bill Cosby. But you raise a good point. I mean, think back over the past 20, 30 years. I think about my life, Craig. I used to listen and watch Bill Cosby as a child, and we all grew up with him. We watched The Cosby Show. He was this icon and a father figure to so many of us. And now to see him walking into court, criminally charged, of course, not convicted of any crime, but just to see that walk was something else. And I know for the victims who I've talked to, I should say those who accuse Bill Cosby of crimes, who I've talked to, this is a remarkable, remarkable day.
Kate, thank you. If you can't stand by, I do want to come back to you one more time. But second-degree felony. This is a second-degree felony. Break that down for us in the simplest of terms. What does that mean?
It means that it's less than a first-degree felony, so it's not as serious, and you don't have a first degree where life is on the back end, or that's even a possibility, and you have a lesser sentencing options. And in some cases, I don't know if this would be one of those, there is always the possibility of something like probation instead of a jail alternative, instead of jail.
The likelihood that something like this goes to trial, Karen?
Well, I think that you're going to have to go to trial on this at this point, because the prosecutor is not going to make a deal. He's not going to accept a plea deal, Craig.
That's the
point.
So
you're going to have to wind up going to trial. Is
no
he going
chance
to make
of a
it
plea.
for trial? No, I don't think that the prosecutor can give a plea, because I don't think he would accept one. I think that he has, and you know, from the beginning of this case, adamantly denied, vigorously, suing people for defamation. I don't think now he's going to say, okay, I'll take a plea.
I think Karen is completely correct, and I've represented hundreds, if not thousands, of sex offenders, and there's something about the most serious sexual offenders where they cannot wrap their head around the crimes they have committed. They are so far removed from it that they will not accept it. So I completely agree with her. This guy's not going to plead guilty.
Kate, I know that you spent a lot of time with more than 24 of the other accusers. What did they tell you about the tone and tenor with which Bill Cosby and the people around Bill Cosby have denied these allegations from the beginning?
Well, in their view, they found it insulting. They thought that he was protected by a group of people who put a wall around him over the years. They feel that Bill Cosby thought he was entitled and able to get away with things. So that's their perspective on all of this, is that this was a man who thought he would never have to face any consequences for what they say he did. So that's part of why some women are writing me now and saying this is vindication for us, Craig, because they feel that this is finally, aside from the civil suits that he faces right now, this is finally a criminal charge. And that's the big distinction here. For all these months that we've been talking about Bill Cosby, none of the cases, none of the other accusers were able to move forward with a criminal case against him. And that's what's happening today with a case that, by the way, is 10 years old. But now with new evidence, the prosecutor going back at Bill Cosby for this charge.
We should let our viewers and listeners know that they do not allow cameras inside this courtroom. They also do not allow audio recording devices. That is why you're not getting a live look or a live listen into what's happening there. But we are told by our reporter on the scene, Adam Reese, that Cosby is expected to emerge fairly quickly. So we'll probably get another look at him here in just a few moments. But again, it was about 7 minutes ago, right at 2:30, when Bill Cosby, legendary television icon, Bill Cosby, comedian, father figure to so many people in this country, walked into that courthouse to tell a judge that he's not guilty. Kate Snow just telling us that we believe the woman there, the woman that you see to our right, to Cosby's left, is most likely Monique Presley, Cosby's latest attorney of record. We should note he's had a number of attorneys since the charges were brought. Adam Reese is on the ground there. Adam, what can you tell us?
Craig, I just want to expand on what Kate was saying. Kate, who has spoken to many accusers, I think many of these women watching this today are stunned that they felt that this day would never come. And to see, as you mentioned just 7 minutes ago, to see him walk this gauntlet of cameras, almost trip over the curb as he made his way into this very small courthouse in this small town north of Philadelphia to face very serious charges. And then we'll see him make his way out in a couple minutes here. I think many of these women thought that this day would never come, Craig.
We've been asking our viewers to weigh in on our Pulse question today on the charges against Bill Cosby and whether you think these charges will change your opinion of him. Let's take a look at some of the results so far and how you're responding. Pretty close, pretty split here when it comes to these results so far. 49% of you say yes, they do change your opinion of Bill Cosby. 51% of you say no. Keep the votes coming, pulse.msnbc.com, and we'll have another update for you a little bit later in our show.
Question. Mr. Cosby urged her to take pills that he provided to her and to drink wine, the effect of which rendered her unable to move, respond to his advances, and he committed aggravated indecent assault upon her.
Attorneys for the alleged victim praised the DA, but said, quote, in that this matter is now being pursued in the criminal justice system. We will not comment further. NBC News has reached out to Cosby's team for a response, but has not yet heard back. Cosby has previously repeatedly denied all allegations against him, and until today, he has never been charged with a crime. This month, Cosby sued 8 of his accusers for defamation. Let's get right to Rosemary Connors with our affiliate NBC Philadelphia. She's outside the district court in Montgomery County where Bill Cosby will be arraigned just a few hours from now. And Rosemary, what do we know about the arraignment? And specifically, are cameras going to be allowed in that courtroom?
We do not expect cameras to be allowed inside the courtroom, Francis. We do know that Bill Cosby is expected to arrive here at this Montgomery County District Court sometime a little bit later on this afternoon, right around 4 o'clock. The statute of limitations was just about to run up in this case, and that's why we're hearing about these criminal charges now. In fact, prosecutors here in Montgomery County had reopened this investigation just earlier this year in the summertime when depositions from the civil case involving Andrea Constand and Bill Cosby became public, and that's really what prompted them, again, to reopen the investigation. As you mentioned, this all stems from that 2004 incident at Cosby's home here in Cheltenham Township, Montgomery County, in which Andrea Constand, as you said, who was an employee at Temple at the time, had come over to his house. She claims that she was drugged and assaulted. In fact, I picked up the affidavit here not too long ago. Inside the affidavit, it says that Andrea told prosecutors, investigators, and police that she was in and out of consciousness, that she felt paralyzed during this incident. The affidavit also gives Bill Cosby's side to this story. He told investigators and police that this was a romantic relationship, that he and Andrea Constand were not just friends or in a mentor-mentee relationship, but that they were romantically involved. He says that this encounter was consensual. He also told investigators, according to the affidavit, that he gave Andrea Constand nothing more than over-the-counter Benadryl and not something more potent. Francis?
But if you look back in this case, we understand also that in 2005 that the district attorney failed to present this case in front of a grand jury, and also that this case was involved in a civil suit.
It does, right. And as I mentioned, what we do know about prosecutors here in Montgomery County is that earlier in the year, it was actually an effort by the Associated Press to bring those depositions from the civil case to make them public. Once they were made public, that's what prompted the prosecutors to look into this case, to re-interview witnesses, to talk to Andrea Constand, to talk to her mother and others in order to bring these criminal charges.
And talk a little bit about the feel there, the tone there, especially in Montgomery County. We know Bill Cosby is from Philadelphia. For many, many years, revered a hero, not just, you know, in the country, but certainly there where he lived, where he's from. Talk to me about the tone, especially with these charges coming today, and many hearing that now Bill Cosby has not only been charged, but he will show up in court for that arraignment in just a couple of hours.
That's right. We do expect this to be a face-to-face arraignment, Francis. Look, Bill Cosby has been beloved here in Philadelphia, a hometown hero, somebody who's been very popular, somebody who often comes back to the city of Philadelphia. He's been very involved, of course, in the Temple University community. As a proud alumnus, you often see him wearing the Temple shirt. It was this time last year when he resigned from the Board of Trustees. He was not a fixture at this year's commencement. And so it's been very difficult for the community here at Temple, as well as other neighborhoods and other organizations inside Philadelphia, to really process this, because this is somebody who has been revered and admired by so many. And we've heard the allegations over the past year, and now we have this criminal charge.
All right, certainly when it comes to this accuser, Andrea Constand, who was an employee of Temple University, linked with Bill Cosby through the women's basketball team as well. WCAU's Rosemary Connors, appreciate the update. For more, I want to dive in now with our panel. Seema Iyer, former prosecutor in criminal defense and civil rights attorney, also MSNBC anchor Kate Snow, whose extensive reporting on this case includes an interview with 27 women who have accused Cosby of a wide range of inappropriate behavior, and also MSNBC national correspondent Joy Reid, who has covered this story extensively as well. To all of you, great to have you here as we dive into this. There are so many aspects, from connecting dots from other cases to the charges now. Let's start with that, Seema, with you and the charges. Interesting how this is called aggravated indecent assault, sexual assault, but not rape.
Right, that's correct. So rape usually requires sexual intercourse. This wasn't intercourse. This was digital penetration, fingers into the vagina. That's what he's alleged to have been done. And she was also, it was without her consent, and she was unconscious. There was allegedly pills and wine involved in this. So it is a felony. He is facing 5 to 10 years in prison, but it is not rape or that type of predatory sexual assault, which could have faced life.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with it, when it comes to the tiers of sexual assault and the charges there, this is considered pretty much one of the lower tiers under felony.
That is correct, because it's not intercourse. That is correct.
All right. And when we look at this, okay, you think of this is just one out of so many accusers. You sat down with the 27 accusers. We have heard from them as well. Of course, we know that Cosby has denied all of these allegations that include groping, drugging, or assaulting. Cosby has strongly denied the allegations and even filed a defamation suit against some of these accusers. In fact, let's play a little bit of what some of them told you, Kate.
How many of you believe you were drugged by Bill Cosby? How many of you believe Bill Cosby raped you?
He drugged me without my knowledge, and he raped me.
He drugged me and violently raped me.
I was drugged and raped.
He flipped me over and raped me.
Andrea Constand was not one of the women Kate Snow interviewed. So when you hear about this, and you hear the pattern time and time again, that many of these women felt that Bill Cosby, had that mentor relationship with him, that they saw him as kind of a father figure that could help them, and then the drugging, the assault after that. Talk to me a little bit about what they have to say and how they could potentially weigh in if and when this goes to trial.
Well, and that's a really interesting part of all this, Francis, is that they may be called as witnesses in this new criminal, if it goes to trial, this new criminal suit or what am I trying to say? Case.
Yeah, the case.
Here's the thing. When you sit down with that number of people It is very easy to see patterns. They all describe similar things happening to them. Not all the same, to be clear. Not everybody says they were raped. Not everybody says they were drugged, but the majority do. Many of them, as you said, Francis, claim that he developed a relationship with them. He was mentoring them. He was going to be like a father figure to them. In some cases, they told me that they were told not to say anything, that he threatened them in some ways, or that they just felt that they couldn't tell anyone because they were so ashamed. It was a different era. Many of these charges stem back, 20, 30 years, 40 years ago. So it was a different era then. I think what's important for people to know, Francis, is how we got here, right? So Andrea Constant was one of the first really, to have her case become public knowledge. And that's because she went to the police back in 2004, over 10 years ago, wanted criminal charges to be filed, and the prosecutor at that time, and has said since, he didn't see enough evidence to convict. So he did not pursue criminal charges at that time. So then she goes to a civil suit. She then files a civil case in 2005, I believe it was filed. They end up settling that out of court. But there were 12 so-called Jane Does who were willing to testify on her behalf. They were kind of in the wings waiting, unnamed, called Jane Does because they wanted to be anonymous. And all those women, after things start to come to light more recently, they all start coming forward, and then we've had this sort of this follow-on effect.
And speaking of that, and to that point in the same case, another turning point in all of this, which we all covered extensively, was with the release of that deposition, which again falls under that civil suit of Andrea Constant. And Joy, you covered that then, and then this step now, this again another pivotal step in seeing this. There's got to be that sense for many of these years, knowing that some of these first accusations, they stem back decades. Speak to that about Bill Cosby and the team feeling, was there a sense of invincibility that they, all these years, they could pay off these women and kind of wiggle their way around it and never see criminal charges come to light?
Or just ignore it, because if you think about the timeline here, the earliest allegations date back to the late 1960s. So you're talking about over a period of 40 or 50 years, these individual allegations, women who had never spoken to each other and who really only started to connect themselves to one another after, not Andrea Constant, but one of the Jane Does came forward with a Washington Post column. Barbara Bowman. Right, that actually came out in 2006 and really kind of went nowhere. And then suddenly, within the last 14 months, a comedian makes light of it, and suddenly that story comes back. And then the Constant story comes back. And then you have women from the early 60s, the late 60s, the 70s, the 80s, slowly start to come forward. All of these cases, the statute of limitations having run out. And I think it's important to remember just who we're talking about here. Bill Cosby was a groundbreaking African-American comedian and actor, but also someone who launched series after series that made history. Bill Cosby and the Cosby Kids, whether it's I Spy, which was, I believe, the first African-American helmed daily television series. Then he has the Cosby Show, which was the longest-running #1 hit primetime series since All in the Family in the 1970s.
But even his role there as this, perfect father.
And he was a moral.
Well, and many of the accusers point that out, that this sort of dichotomy between, and some of them worked with him on the Cosby Show and were actors on the Cosby Show. Many of them were models or actresses. And they describe this idea that he's this figure who's up on a pedestal, who you, first of all, don't think you can take on because he's got a machinery around them, they would say. But then you're having this thing happen in private to you, and it's so different from the image that he's putting out to the public that they were torn apart by that feeling of being betrayed by America's dad.
And the intimidation, saying, hey, you know what, he's taking me under my wing, according to these women, the actresses, the models, saying he can help me further my career. He's maybe will give me a spot on the Cosby Show, as some of them have claimed.
Right, which is one of the things, by the way, to be fair, that the Cosby camp has said over the last months, is that maybe some of these women, and I put this question to the women when I talked to them, maybe they were in it for fame, maybe they were in it, and maybe they're sort of making these things up now now because they want more fame. Now, when I put that to the group, they laughed.
Yeah.
They all said that's ridiculous.
And you also have the Cosby camp pointing to kind of the atmosphere of the 1970s and early 1980s and sort of what Hollywood was like. And to be clear, we're talking about an atmosphere that include allegations that took place at the Playboy Mansion, right? This idea that a celebrity is surrounded by women who want his attention. And the Cosby camp really points to that and tries to say, perhaps, but in this sort of fog of drugs and sex and kind of that permissive atmosphere, that maybe these women are sort of, you know, changing kind of what happened.
Don't forget, that was before rape shield laws.
Exactly.
So that was a different time.
Well, let's bring it back as far as the legality of this now, where this moment where he is facing that charge, and given the timing of it, too, because we were talking about days away from the statute of limitations expiring here. This is more of what the prosecutor had to say earlier today.
Prosecutor's job is to follow the evidence wherever it takes us. And sometimes that means whenever it comes to light. Reopening this case was not a question. Rather, reopening this case was our duty as law enforcement officers with a sworn obligation to uphold our constitutions and to uphold the law.
All right, so you look at the timing here, Seaman, help people understand why this is coming out now. You have this alleged incident happening in 2004. You have the civil suit and the DA, you know, presenting the grand jury or failing to in 2005 as well. They're saying new evidence that was admitted. So let's talk about that. That happened this year. And is that the defamation case?
That is the defamation case. That's his admissions to having given the women.
And the deposition.
The deposition from the civil case 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
That just now got released.
Right. Yeah. But let's just be clear. So the statute of limitations is almost up. So why rush to justice? They took their time getting close to that deadline. Also, they did it around the holiday, I think, to lessen the paparazzi and the press at the scene. So that's, I think, another important aspect.
And one other little wrinkle here, Francis, if you've paid any attention to Montgomery County politics, the former district attorney who declined to prosecute back in 2005, he ran again for his seat in November this year and ran against the guy you just saw, Kevin Steele, and lost. The two of them ran ads, or we ran some of them on MSNBC. They ran ads against each other, each trying to sort of outdo each other. I'll go after Bill Cosby. No, I'll go after Bill Cosby. So it is not completely surprising that this comes out now, because they had both promised to look in. They had promised to investigate.
Well, let's look ahead. Interesting now how we look ahead now. Bill Cosby is going to stand in court charged with sexual assault. Joy, whether we see, you know, we understand cameras will not be in the courtroom, but I'm sure, I don't know, we're going to see him get out of his vehicle into the courthouse. How does this change this? We know the domino effect legally when it comes down to this, but now, as I've heard several times today, that this is a game changer now when it comes to Bill Cosby.
It absolutely is, because up until now, the Cosby camp has been able to try to write these women off as either making up a story or in the defamation suit of libeling him and being unfair to him. Now he's going to go from being the iconic America's dad figure. Then he was the pound cake speech moralizer who was essentially lecturing, particularly African Americans, on comportment and behavior, to a man marching into court to face very serious charges. It'll be interesting to see if Camille Cosby is there.
She's always stood by him.
She has stood by him, and she has been, you know, his supporter throughout. But I think that this figure of this person now being sort of in the docket, it's a very, very different image of Bill Cosby. It'll be interesting to see how he bears up under it and how that changes the whole story of him.
Absolutely.
I think it has been dramatically and inalterably changed.
And Kate, on the other side, the vindication for so many of these accusers, the 50-plus, whose statute of limitations, who have no cases that they can pursue.
But they also may get their day in court testifying for the prosecution.
Yeah, I'm getting text messages from many of them. I got to know these women. We spent a lot of days with them, so some of them are reaching out, and that's the word, vindication, is the word that they use. They already were feeling that in the power of their numbers this fall, and the fact that the world was starting to listen to them. They felt in some ways vindicated, but many of them said they wanted justice, and they felt like he deserves jail time. So for them, this day is emotional and painful, but also a welcome day from their point of view.
And it'll be interesting to see how that continues on, when this goes to court, the outcome of that, if he is acquitted, if he's found guilty, and if these accusers continue to feel that way then. To all of you, thank you so much for your perspective here. Interesting to have this conversation as we are watching these breaking developments today. Seema Iyer, Kate Snow, Joey Reid, as always, thank you very much. Of course, Kate Snow will have much more on this story. She dives into